All right, so today we're going to talk about the has many through association, or it's also called the many to many relation. And we're going to implement this obviously in Ruby and Rails. So we've looked at the in Rails the has many association, where one thing can have many of another thing and those belong to that thing. So like a user could have many posts on Facebook, but all those posts belong to a user. And that's a very real, you see that very often in the real world. Another association you will see in databases in the real world is what's called a many-to-many relationship. And in Rails, it's a has many through. And what this is when you have two models that have many of each other. So for example, you can have a physician and patients. So a physician has many patients, a patient has many physicians. Now, whenever we have this many-to-many associations, we're going to have a third model or a third table. This is our through table. You might hear it called a join table. And this table is going to be the table that associates those two things together. And really the important thing with this through table or this join table is it's going to have the IDs of both the other models. And we can throw in other columns. So for example, in this one, we could have an appointments table or model that has the physician ID, the patient ID, and then the date. And then this would be a way we could keep track of dates. So I would say like this: a patient has many physicians through appointments, and a physician has many patients through appointments. And in Rails, that's how we're going to code it out. So a physician has many appointments. They're both going to have many of the join table. And then a physician is going to have many patients through the appointments table. And with the appointment's going to belong to a physician, belong to a patient, because the appointment table is going to keep track of the IDs. And then our patient has many appointments and has many physicians through appointments. So this is what it would look like, if we did this as our database schema, and this is what it's going to look like in Rails. So for lecture today, and this is going to take 2 days, so we're definitely not going to get done with this today. We'll finish this tomorrow. We're going to do a LMS system, like a learning management system, something like Neo. Neo is a learning management system. We're going to do a basic one where we have two models. We have users and courses. So think about it, just in the real world, a user can have many courses and a course can have many users. And we're going to join these two tables with this enrollments table. So I would have a user ID and a course ID. Now we're throwing in another column in here, role. So a user could be enrolled in a course as like a teacher or a student. So that's what this column is for. So that is the has many. Oh, I have not done a starter project. All right, let's see if we can clone this one down. This one's getting a little old. I might have, actually, let me look at this one. Nope, this is not the right one. Normally I have you like create a starter project by this lecture. We haven't done that yet. I wonder if I have another one. If not, we can just create one. Let's search my repos. There we go. Let's use this one. I just gotta see if I have any, how much code I have in here. Semantic loader. Okay, there might be some stuff in here we didn't code, but let's go ahead and clone this one down and see what it looks like. So let me throw this out in Slack. Git clone. And this is going to be, we're going to name this LMS. So go ahead, go into like week 5 or wherever you want to clone this from. Clone this directory. So we get LMS. So we name that LMS W21. Open this up in code. This one. Now, I believe this one in the README has some instructions for getting this set up. There's one step I kind of want to show you that's going to be a little new as far as cloning down a repo. Because eventually, we haven't done this yet, but eventually I'm going to want you to create your own starter projects. Things that are going to have stuff like React Router set up, stuff like your gems and Axios set up. Just so when we start lecture, we don't have to like do Axios. We don't have to install all of our gems. We can just clone down something. Now for this, and you can do that with your homework as well, just to save you some time on your homework. But one thing, if I'm using this starter project and I do like a Rails DB create, I don't know if I have this yet or not. Let's see if I do. Like I already have this database. Now I could just drop it. But which we've done in the past. But let's kind of like think a little about this a little more in detail. If I want to have this starter project that I'm using for multiple, like as a starting template for multiple projects, what's the problem with dropping my database?
Anything you've used it before, you're going to lose everything out of it.
Yeah, so let's say I cloned this repo yesterday and did like a taco app. And I did all my taco models and all that stuff for tacos. And then today I'm doing my LMS. Well, if I drop my database, I'm going to be dropping the database for the taco app and creating one for my LMS app. Because they're going to share this same starter fall 21 development name. So what I want to do is I want to rename this database. And how I can rename my database is in VS Code, I'm going to do a Command P to look for a file. I'm going to look for my database.yml file. It's also called YAML, database YAML file. and open that up. And that is just in your config folder, database YAML. And when I created this project, I call it starter fall 21. So what I want to do is I want to like change this name right here. So what I can do is I can highlight this starter fall 21. So I'm going to highlight it and then I'm going to do a Command F. I think Command F is one of these key commands you should just memorize. Command find. It works in like Chrome. It works in a lot of different applications. So if you do Command F, it's a way you can, find something in there. Like since I highlighted starter fall 21, it was there. I could also type in fall 21 and it's going to find all that text in there that matches. With VS Code, I can also, there's this arrow pointing right at the left. If I click on that, it gives me a way to replace this. Because really what I want to do is I want to come in here and replace this. Now I could do this manually and like try to find these each individually. That'd be a pain. So what I do is I find all of these starter fall 21 text, and then I can replace this with whatever I want to name this. So I'm going to call this LMS W21.
Is the find like caps sensitive?
You can make it cap sensitive with this right here. So if that's selected, then it'll be cap sensitive. If not, it won't be. This thing on the right here, it's going to match the whole word. So if I have this selected, it's not going to match starter fall 21 underscore development because that's not the full word, but it will match that starter fall 21.
If it is cap sensitive or if it's not cap sensitive, I don't know exactly which one. So like, let's say you're doing starter fall 21 and there were some starter capital fall 21, would it automatically change the like auto capitalize the areas where it was capitalized to whatever you change it, if that makes sense?
No, this is just finding. See, I have caps, so I don't have case on, so it's going to match it. If I turn on caps, it's not going to match it. What it's going to change it to is whatever I put down here. So I find the words, and you can like scroll through and you can see where they're highlighted. So those are the matches. And then down here, there's two options to replace. I can replace all, or I can replace one at a time. I kind of like just, depending on what I'm doing, do one at a time, because then I can like go through and make sure I actually want to change it. So yes, I want to change that. And then when I click that, notice how it's changing. I'm going to change that. Yes. Sure. There we go. And there we go. That's renamed now. Really, the only one I care about is probably this development database one, just renaming that one. But we'll just go ahead and rename all of them. So once we do push up to production, we don't run into the same issue. So now that that's done, now I can do a Rails DB create. And notice how it created these two databases, the LMS W21 development and LMS W21 test. So we're only using the development database, so cool. Another thing, I'm kind of going out of order of the README, just because these are new things that we're going to want to do. Another thing I'm definitely going to want to do, I always forget to do this and then it screws up my starter project, is I want to remove the remote. Get remote RM origin. Why is that important? I remove the remote.
because it's just a starter project. So whatever project you're going to be working on is going to have its own remote.
Yeah, and if I don't remove it and I push, it's going to be pushing to my starter project. So I go in and I start making changes because I want this now to be my LMS app. If I push up to my starter project, well, now my starter project is going to have all these LMS changes. I've done that before where like I've done whole repos, like lectures, and then pushed up to my starter project. I'm like, dang it. Now it's just that. Now it's no longer a starter project. It's my whatever app. Cool. So now that that's removed, and yeah, I have these instructions on the README. I think once we'll do a starter project eventually. But I think that is essentially it as far as like new steps. We just rename the database and remove the remote. And then from there, it's just the same. We're going to want to do a bundle. We can do a Rails. We did a Rails DB create. I'm not sure if this one has a migration folder. So let's just do a Rails DB migrate. I guess this has like a little demo model on it. So I could migrate, maybe even seed. I think sometimes I have like on my starter projects, just like a dummy model, some dummy data, just to test it out, make sure it's working. So I could do a Rails DB create, DB migrate, DB seed, and a bundle, then start this up, Rails port 3001. Oh, Rails S port 3001. Start up my Rails server, and then I can come in and do all my JavaScript stuff. Oh, cd into client, run yarn. So I tried running yarn in my Rails project. That didn't work. I hope it didn't create a, oh, it did create a yarn lock and a node modules. So I ran yarn in my Rails app. Don't want to do that. It's not like a huge deal, but it created a yarn lock file, which I don't want to have in the root of my Rails app right now. There's no purpose for it, so I'm going to delete that. I'm also going to delete this node modules folder that it created. In my client, it's fine that there's a node modules in my client. That's where it should be. And a yarn lock in my client. I want all those. I just don't want them in the directory of my Rails app. Then I can do a yarn start. Let's go to localhost 3000. So it looks like this we have semantics set up. I have this things page set up. I think it's just doing an Axios call. Like, see, we're doing an Axios call, getting back some data. So I know like my Axios is working, have React router, semantic. Even on this one, I have like some basic component demos, a semantic loader, but that's about it for now. So it's just kind of bare bones project, but you know, that's probably like 30 minutes worth of work to get all this set up, even if I'm moving quick. So let's keep going. All right, so back to the has many. Let's go ahead and create our models. We can always reference back to our diagram. I think this can like be useful. So we have, let's do our users and courses model. And I'm just going to switch our user to have a name. I'm not going to really worry about first and last name. Just don't want to type it all out. So I'm going to switch that just to be, we could say like a full name. Rails G model. No, full name. Oh, sorry, Rails G model user. And our user has like a full name. So there's our user model. We're going to create our course model, Rails G model course. And our course just has a name. We're going to keep these simple. We could add a description, a whole bunch of other things, but we're going to just kind of keep this simple. Oh, wait. Sorry. We're not actually. Never mind. We're going to delete these models because we're going to do something different. Rails G model. Let's do Rails D model user and Rails D model course. Sorry, we're not going to be building this. Sorry, we're going to be doing, I forgot I switched this last cohort. We're going to do a, like a skill app where a user has many skills and a skill has many users. And they're joined through a grade table. So this is a way you could have like a user like John has skill JavaScript and has a grade on that skill. So it could be either like a grading assignment. You could use it to grade assignments or use it just to score how many skills, like what is your score on a particular skill. So it's going to be similar where we have a model user, and then we're going to have a model skill, and we're going to have a model grade. And our grade is going to be our through association. So let's do that. So we can regenerate our user model, Rails G model user. Let's just give it a name. So we're going to do Rails G model skill. We'll give that a name. And then a Rails G model grade. So our grade is going to have a score, which is going to be an integer. Now this is our through table. So our grade table is going to have a user that it belongs to. And it's also going to have a skill it belongs to. Okay. I think we could have, it's just like another, if we go back just to the has many, I think we could have a user have many grades. And we would still do it like this, where the user belongs to, we have this user model that the grade belongs to. But now we also just have another model that it belongs to, which is the skill. Let's go ahead and do a DB migrate. And let's go look at our schema. So we have these two new, this is my little demo for the starter project. We have a user table that just has a name attribute. We have a skills table, which just has a name. So two basic tables. But here's a little more, here's the interesting table. And this is wrong. I think I had a space. So how I know this is wrong is this has a user ID, but it does not have a skill ID. I think when I typed this, that space screwed that up. So I can do a Rails D model grade. Regenerate it. I think that space was probably what screwed it up. Remigrate it, Rails DB migrate. Let's do this Rails DB. Okay. There we go. So that's better. So my users and skills look the same. But here on my grades table, so it has this one score column that's an integer. And then here's the important part, is it has these two foreign keys on it. So my grades table is going to keep track of the user ID and skill ID. And those are going to relate to the primary key on my skills and users table. We'll get this set up so it's working. I think once we get this set up in code, we can kind of look at it through an example. So now my database is set up. So that's my database. I'm now next going to set up Rails so it knows about this association. So I can go to my user model. So my user has many grades. But my user model also has many skills. But it's not directly, it's through the grades table that it has these skills. If I go to my skill table, once again, my skill has many grades, and it has many users through my grades table. If I look at my grade RB file, this was automatically put there for us. Our grade belongs to a user and a skill. It just means, i.e. it has those foreign keys. It has a user ID and a skill ID. So I'm going to slack out some faker stuff. For Slack. I'm going to just do part of it for now. So we go to our seeds file. You can get rid of this thing.create. Oh, I don't think we gave it a description, so I'm going to. Let's just give our skill a description. So what I could do here to give my skill a description is come into my migration file, find my skills table, let's give it a description. So I find my migration for my skills table. I don't change my schema, I change my migration. I just add a description column. So if I add it to my migration folder, I need to drop my database and recreate it, which is fine because I haven't really done anything with my database right now. So Rails db drop, db create, db migrate. And yeah, now I can actually run db seed. If I go look at my schema now my skills has this description category on it. All right. So let's go back to our seeds file. I'm going to type this one out. So let's say I want to create 5 users. So I can just write some Ruby and do a 5 times do loop. So do what's ever inside of this do end block 5 times. First thing I want to do is just create a user. So name, and then we can use Faker because we have Faker for this. We have Faker imported already. Faker name dot name. That will just give me a random name. So I create 5 skills and then I create 5 users. So let's say I do like a grade dot create. I mean, I know we're just learning about the grade dot create or this has many through. What do you think has to be here for this to work? And I can go back to the schema. When I'm creating a grade, what 2 values do I have to have?
User ID and a skill ID.
Yeah, I have to have user ID, skill ID. It's right there, it's saying null cannot be false. So this is a backend validation on my database. So I need a user underscore ID. Well, I just created this user. So let's grab that user dot ID. Skills ID. Maybe I could just use this iterator. I'm pretty sure this starts at 1 and then goes up to 5. So this would go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I could maybe, I wonder if I could just like write this in. Maybe I'll check this out as I run it. I forget if it starts at 1 or 0 or 1. But what I can do is I can, for the skill ID, I can just use this. And then make sure maybe at the start, like I skill dot destroy all. Maybe, or before I, destroy all my grades. Destroy all skill. Actually, maybe this is not the best way to do this. How can I pull this ID? Let's do this.
Assign it to a variable.
Yeah, let's assign it to a variable. Let's assign all of these to a variable S1, S2, S3, S4, S5. Syntax error. So now I can use one of these variables like S1.id. And then the score, we can just do like a random number, 0 to 100. So that's going to go through 5 times, create 5 users, and create 1 grade for each user. That's all going to be skill 1. What if I want each user to have grades for all of these skills?
So each time it goes through and creates one of those, is it always going to use skills like just S1's ID instead of like a new ID for each of them?
Yeah, it's always going to, yeah, this one's going to create 5 users, and they're all going to have a random score for skill 1. Because yeah, it's using that ID. So if I wanted to make this a little more random, or I wanted to like maybe loop over this, because I have like 5 skills, could do something like this. Actually, let's do this for now. I'm very curious. I want to see what I starts off as. So let's just see if this works. So I'm creating, or we could even do this. Score 3. Score 4. That's kind of like a crude way to do this, but it works. Actually, that's fine. Let's just leave it like this. I think we could clean this up with like a loop, right? Because we're just changing the ID right here. So I think we could definitely loop over this, but I think this is fine for now. So let's go ahead and create this, because now we're creating 5 users. For each of those users, we're going to create 5 grades. And before we have 5 skills. So if I did like a puts skill.length, skill.all.length. And user.all.length. And grade.all.length. What this would be 5, that should be 5, and that should be 25. So if I now run my seeds file, rels db seed, I'm going to drop, I don't know if I forgot if I had any seeds information in there. So I'm going to drop, recreate, remigrate it. Okay, there's my puts. So I guess the time starts at a 0, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. There's the length of my users and skills and grades. I'll slack this out. Okay. So let's go explore this a little just in the console before we start trying to write any code, just so we can kind of see how this is working. So let's say I grab my first user. So user1 equals user dot first. Iveta and Michelle. So I can grab user1. I can see all of their grades because a user has many grades. So let's look at all their grades. Well, user, so this is Iveta. So notice all the user IDs, these are all 1 in this grades column. Oh, sorry, and the user ID is always going to be 1 because I'm looking at Iveta's grades. So her ID is 1. But she has, you know, skill ID 1, skill ID 2, skill ID 3, skill ID 4, skill ID 5 for each of these grades. So how would I figure out, you know, what is skill ID 3? Like what, this is just the number, but I could do like skill dot find 3. Like what skill is that? Let's go see what skill that is. That is React. User dot find 1. That's Iveta. So you see how my grades table, it's keeping track of the IDs. So skill ID is 3, which is React. And user 1 is Michelle. Or sorry, Iveta. So Iveta got a 92 on React. Is that kind of making sense how like this grades table is really joining these two tables by keeping track of the user ID and the skill ID? It doesn't have like, it's not going to have like the username or the skill name or the skill description on the grades table. It's going to have a way to direct us back to that information via the foreign key. So if I did like grade.all, here's all of my grades. Like, you know, this grade, this has an ID of 7. So in the grade table, this would have this primary key of ID 7. But really what is most interesting is this user ID 2 and skill ID 2 and score 58. So I could, you know, do a user dot find 2 to see which user that is. That's Merino Blonde. And then I could do a skill dot find that also had an ID, skill ID of 2. And that's Rails. So Mariano got a 58 on Rails. User 2, we could store this to a variable. Now let's store this to a variable. User 2 would be user dot find, the one with ID 2. So user dot skills. So the other thing we can do is we can see what skills do they have. User 2 dot skills. So these are all the skills that user 2 has. You could also go backwards, like skill dot first dot users. That's going to show me all of the users that have that skill. So our users, like these are all like really interconnected now. So I could also do something like this. I could say, hey, grade dot first. So there's the grade dot first. Let's grab that user. Oh, it's Iveta. Let's do grade dot first dot skill. That's Ruby. So we're getting a lot of help from Rails to kind of connect these tables behind the scenes. Not next week. I think when we get back from Christmas break, we'll we'll do some actual SQL where we'll kind of do this stuff on our own behind this. Like Rails is doing a lot of this with SQL behind the scenes, but when after we get back from Christmas, we'll start writing our own SQL to kind of see how we would do that. I mean, you can see part of the SQL here. It's a little more messy than what we're going to write, but that's underneath the hood. That's kind of what's going on. It's just doing some SQL calls to pull the right data from our database. Does that kind of, at least at a high level, does this association, the many-to-many association make sense? I know this is, I think this is a tough homework for a lot of, or tough concept when you first learn about it, but yeah, let's just keep going. Let's see some examples now. So I'm going to create 3 controllers now, and let's just do this all at once. So these are all going to be namespace with API. So we're going to do our skills. Oh, I need my controller keyword. We're going to do our skills controller. And then we're going to do our grades controller and our users controller. And for now, let's see here. So we ran these 3 commands: API skills, API users, and our API grades. So those are the 3 controllers. Let's just go add these to our routes. We can leave that one there, that's fine. So I'm just going to do resource routing for all of these resources. Let's do skills. And let's do users. I'm not going to nest any of these. They're all going to be their separate grades for now. And I think for the users controller, I think I'm just going to slack this out. There's nothing new going on here. Let me just slack this one out. This is just kind of like our default controller. So I think, yeah, this makes it so hard to copy and paste. Dear Neil, you need a damn like copy button. There we go. All right. So there's the users controller. It's pretty, yeah, nothing new going on here. Same thing with our skills controller. Throw that inside of there, select that out too. Oop, there's a typo right there. That one. I just changed that. There was a typo right here, this description. We need a semicolon right there. All right. So let's go to our grades controller now. And for this first week, when we first talk about this has many association, since we don't know SQL, we're gonna do this in just like a kind of it's kind of like a not the best way, but just a way that's going to work. So here's what I'm going to do. And another thing that gets a little harder with like the has many through association, it's I think how your data comes back can be a little more up in the air. But let's kind of just kind of get a method working. So what I'm going to do is, you know, I really don't want to here. Normally I would say like render JSON grade.all. Now the problem with grade.all is this is going to give me back, you know, that array of objects with like user ID and skill ID and the grade. I don't know. I could, so there's like I could do like in my front end, I could grab all my users, I could grab all my skills from these other Axios calls I did. And then I could grab all of these grades that have the user ID and then the skill ID. And then in my front end, do that logic to kind of merge the two together. Does that kind of make sense what I'm trying to say here? Like, let's say, I don't know, user ID 0, ID 1. So I could do, right now, this is what my Axios calls the index method would do, because my users controller, we render JSON all users. My skills controller renders JSON skill.all. And my grades controller renders grade.all. So between those three calls, this is the data I could get back on my front end. Because probably what I might want to have is a UI. You know what would be really nice if I had something like this, like a name. And like I don't know, I'm just kind of winging this like a skill name. Ruby and a score. Because on the front end, that's kind of what the type of data I want to use. Because maybe on my grades page, I want to list all the names, go through each of the grades, list the name of the user, the name of the skill, and then the score. But this is the data I would be getting back right now from my Axios calls. So it could definitely in JavaScript convert these three arrays into this one array with some, like as a brain teaser. I'm not asking if it makes sense how to do that. I'm more asking, does it at least make sense, like why you need to do that and like where we're at right now? Because the way our database is set up, this is how we're getting back the database, but our UI, we're going to probably want it to look something like that. And there's some options, you know, we can do this on the back end. Do it on the front end. And then we can do it with SQL. There's also some like Rails helpers. Or we can just do it with like Ruby. Now SQL and Rails are definitely going to be, if we choose to do it on the back end, SQL and Rails are probably going to be the better ways to do it. But let's just do this with some good old fashioned Ruby. And so we're going to do this today on the back end. Maybe another time we can try doing it on the front end. So what I'm going to do is just get rid of all of this. I'm not going to do grade.all. I'm going to do grade because I don't want that. I want grade.all and then some. And then some. So I'm making, do you think my grade model has this method? Probably not. So let's make it have that method, because by default we get a lot of functionality built into our model, because if we look at our model, we're extending from this application record, which is really active record. So we get all of this functionality, but we can come in here and add our own stuff to this class. We're adding this belongs to. We can go in and also add our own methods. So notice that this method that I'm calling it on the model, not an instance of the model. This is a class model since I'm calling it on the class. What I mean by that, if I had like an @grade, or it doesn't even need to be an instance variable. It's like grade equals grade dot first. Just doing a little review of classes. This would be an instance model or instance method. It's called on instance of the class. This one is a class method. It is called on class. These have the same name, but this is valid because they're two different methods. I'm not going to actually have that one work. I just wanted to give you that example, where I grab a instance of my class and then I call a method on it. That's a instance method. If I'm just calling it on the class directly, that is a class method. So yeah, I need to make a class method. So to make a class method in Ruby, I use the def and then I use the self keyword and then whatever I called it. That was all and then some.
The way we're doing it right now is just how you would kind of throw it together if you weren't using SQL, though. That's what you said, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, really what we're going to do is we would still do it the same way, but we could do a SQL call here. So we can do a SQL call here, but not today. This is where we would do it, the SQL call. We would still keep this the same, where we, in our model, or sorry, like in our controller, we call that method, but we define this in our model. But then in that particular method, we could do our SQL call here. But today we're just going to use, some Ruby, some good old fashioned Ruby. And because this is going to be like a little bit of a brain teaser. So, and right here, I can still like, I can do like grades. Let's just put a pry inside of here. Binding dot pry. Just to kind of see what we're doing. So I don't have a UI set up. Any ideas on how to hit this pry? I can just go to do it in Postman, or I could, this is just a index method. This is a GET request. I could just go to a browser, you know, localhost 3001. We can check out our routes. Well, let's start my server. Rails S-P 3001. Since this is a GET request, I don't even need to do this in Postman. I can just do this in my browser. But right, I want to go to that grades index method. So I could just do a GET request, which my browser is doing by default, API/grades. That's spinning, so now I'm stuck in my pry. So see how I am now in this method in my grade.allrb. So I can, when I'm in Rails and I'm in here, like everything's there, I can do like a skill.all. There's all my skills. I can do a grade.all. There's all my grades, you know, user, all, etc. So what I want to do is I want to go through all, I want to return my grades, all of my grades, but instead of having the user ID and the skill ID, I mean, I can return those back. I really want the name of the user and the name of the skill. So let's just see how we can do that with one. So grade equals grade dot first. So if I want to get that first grade user, I can do grade dot user. There's the user. If I want to grab the name, I can just say grade dot user dot name. Likewise, I could do that with skill. So I want to go through this like array of grades and return a new array with, you know, the score. I guess we can keep the user ID and skill ID, or we don't have, and but also the name and the name of the user and name of the skill. Ideas on how to do that, since we kind of did a little bit of exploring in our pry. Want to go through an array, maybe create another array of different looking data. Does that sound like?
Map.
Yeah, that sounds like a map. I'm gonna say this is, I'm gonna make a note, this is a bad way to do this. Like inefficient, I should say inefficient. So bad way to do it, but works. So yeah, we can do our grades dot map do, so it's a little different syntax. We don't give it a function, we do it, give it this thing that's called a block, which is a lot like a function. So go through each of my map, go through each of my grades, and with each grade, I can return, you know, a new thing. So what I want to return is the ID, grade.id. I can do the score. I mean, we could just do, if I did grade.score, score would just be an object. I think that's fine. User the user is going to be grade dot user and skill. Wait, so we got the score, got the user, got the skill, grade dot skill. Now I don't put the return keyword here. That will like break stuff. But this is the last thing in this map. The last line is going to be the thing that's returned into that new array. And then this map function, since it's the last thing in this all and then some, that's going to be returned from this call. So actually, I don't need the return here either because the Ruby has the implicit returns. I refresh this. There we go. We have IDs. So we have the ID 1. That's the ID of the grade. There's the score. There's our user. Our user's an object where we get the ID of the user, the name, updated at and created at. Maybe if I don't want that, I could just do like user.name skill. Maybe I say like user name skill underscore name. I don't want all this nested data. Just do it like that. And, you know, I could still pass the user ID, user.id, sorry, grade user.id, and then we could do the skill, which would be grade skill.id. You know, so I can kind of say, can use Ruby and just say what kind of stuff do I want to get back. So now I have an object that has ID, the grade ID, the score, a username, a skill name, and then also gives me the IDs of the user and skill, which I might want later on, but so that's working. But and like I said, why this is bad, why this is a bad way to do it, is these are actually doing SQL calls. So I'm going through all of my grades and then I'm doing like SQL calls to get like the grade.score. Like that is a SQL call, that's a SQL call. So if I look at my server, like, man, I do one API, I do a GET request to API grades. I'm doing a whole bunch of SQL. And I'm only getting back, this is only 25 entries. So I don't know if this is maybe it's caching it and making it faster, but as this, if I had like 100 users or 1,000 grades, like this is going to get really, really slow. Like this call should really only take probably one SQL call. And we'll see when we get to SQL, we'll kind of we'll learn how to do that. But like I said, for now, we don't really care. It's not like it's not like we can even notice it's that slow. It's like instantaneous. But that is not good that we're doing all these SQL calls. Cool. Sweet. Let's keep going. So there's just a nice little review of kind of some object-oriented programming. So we have our grade model, where we can define our own methods to kind of return data, maybe in a way that's not, you know, the standard way to return data. So we can add that, and then our grades controller, then we can call that method. And then we can render that. Cool. So let's just keep on building out this controller. Let's do a def show. And so let's do a before action of setting grade. So we're going to do this on show and destroy for now. We'll see if we get to like update. Let's do our privates. Set grade. And I think for this one, we can kind of just do something like we normally do, where we just grade.find params ID. For now, we'll just render. I need to set this to an instance variable at grade equals grade.find params ID. And just render JSON at grade. Let's do our grade param. So this one, this can largely come down to how we're creating a grade, because maybe in my grades controller, I'm going to have like a user, maybe I'm going to have a skill, maybe I'm going to have both. But just something to take note of in our routes file. We're not nesting any of these, so we're not going to get like a skill ID or user ID through the URL. That's fine. But something, what we can do, we could just get the skill ID and user ID through like a form. So when we create a grade, what we could do is we could have a drop down where the user selects, or the admin selects a user through a drop down, and then they select a skill, and then they give it a score. And that's how you could create a grade. So if we do our sanitizers, we do params.require, make sure that the grade is there, and we can permit, and we're going to have there be a score, the user ID, and the skill ID. And for our create, when we create a grade, we can just do it on the grade model. So grade at grade equals grade dot new grade params. And so that's why, I mean, we're really going to expect, obviously, user ID and skill ID is going to have to be given to us. And then we can just kind of follow this same convention. If at grade dot save, else end, under JSON at grade. Under JSON, let's do our errors. At grade.error. And then let's do this as status 422. So it's just, if I open up Postman to test this, well, first of all, I could use my browser just to test. can I get grade with the ID of 1 for my show? Undefined method before. What did I do? Before for show. What did I do wrong in this? Hint before is being called on a show object. Where's that coming from? Grades.
Do you need the only keyword on your before action?
Oh, there it is. Yes, thank you. Only. That's it. Refresh. Okay. Thank you. So there's my one. Now I can show one skill, or sorry, one grade. So the show's working for my post. I can use Postman. So I can do API grades. That should be a post request. We need a user underscore ID. Let's grab one. Skill underscore ID. That can also be one. And you have the score key, whatever, 90. Send that up. Oh, I need to do this. So that's my sanitizer. I need to do Postman style, do the grade, and then square brackets grade, square brackets. Square brackets. Okay, there we go. There's that. Send. There we go. So that's working. And yeah, if I don't give it a skill ID, that's going to throw an error. Skill must exist. If I don't give it a grade, my error object says, my user must and my skill must exist. Sweet. So that, I think that's good for the backend. I think one of the things that's a little harder, definitely harder with the has many through, we're definitely getting into territory where it becomes a lot harder to like follow a convention, especially with like UX and UI. Like, there's a lot of different ways we could create this UX UI. It could be like I'm an admin and I want to be able to create skills and create users, or maybe I'm just like a student and I want to be able to view my skills. So we start kind of getting into like role type stuff. I think another good example of like to think about this is like how it can get a little, not confusing, but just a little more advanced, because this is going to be your homework, is doing the physician, this model, like physicians, patients, and appointments. So what does your app, so here's like your database. What does your app look like with that database? It kind of depends on how you like decide the use case. Because I could think of it like maybe it's a, it's like a website made for like an admin of a hospital where they can, go through and look at all the physicians and all the patients and see all of the appointments. Maybe it's a website, and we haven't talked about logging in. Maybe it's a log site where you're a doctor and you want to go to like your page and just see all of your patients, and you want to see all of your patients. Or yeah, maybe it's the other way where you're a patient, you want to just see, and you can only see just your appointments. So I would say for this one, maybe take it as the root, like you're the admin, you kind of have like super user power, since we really haven't talked about logging in or anything. But you can also really create it any way you want. But but even then it's like, how do you create an appointment? Do you first go to like pick a physician and go to like a physician's like show page and then show all that physician's patients and then pick a patient? Or do you have this one page where you have all your physicians and all your patients and like a date? So it just gets to be where there's a lot more many options. So let's keep going. Actually, let's take a break. It's 12. Let's come back at 12:15. I'll push this up to GitHub as well. Oop, I need to create a repo. I'll create a repo and push this up to GitHub.
Hey, James, if you're available at all during the break, could you let me know? Otherwise, no worries.
Yeah, I'm here.
I was wondering if you could help me figure out something that's been driving me nuts on my yesterday's homework.
Yeah.
Trying to get, it's like a form label to change, and I can't get it to work. So let me change it to like the right directory here, but I'm trying to do it through, well, I was trying to do it a few different ways, but like I have this form style that I have around instead of the form by itself, like a styled form. And I changed the font color in there, but that doesn't work. I'll just get into my correct directory. Start yarn. When I inspect it, it's definitely getting color from the semantic style sheet.
Okay.
Just taking a second to load.
So you're trying to style your label?
Yeah, because I changed the color of the background of my form, and now I need to change the color of the text so that I can see it.
Okay.
Okay, so like this text right here is what I'm trying to change. I've tried doing this in this field and this field, nothing seems to change it.
Yeah, so this is a like a semantic thing because you're using this label prop, like line 74.
Mhm.
You have label equals name. So that's kind of behind the scenes. That's creating the HTML that creates the label. So if you go like inspect it, like it's there,
Mhm.
inspect your element.
Yeah, it's there. It's getting blocked from semantic for sure. I just don't know how to override it. I tried it in the CSS file.
Well, so, yeah, so you can see you have this div class field label with the name in it. So you might have to change, let's see. So if we go to this, I need to look at the docs semantic. So what I would do is I would look at the semantic UI docs for their forms and their inputs.
Okay.
And
So like online.
yeah. And let me see, let's see like or maybe even Google style label prop form input semantic. I'm typing this out. There might be like a prop for that, like a label style.
This is different, right? This is like a bunch of different labels that you can get. Is that different from the label?
What you might have to like, so you're using this label prop. So how we have what you're doing that form input. You might need to like, I think that's like an easier way to like add a label, but then the downside is, yeah, it's, I'm just like, so I'm looking at the docs. I don't see a way. Sometimes would maybe give you like a prop to style that label, which I'm not seeing. So let's see, label, let's look at their props. So if we go to the, I'll just go just to their docs, the semantic UI React docs, look at their form element. Look at the inputs. We need some form field. I wonder if even above that form dot input, can you do is there a form dot label? So like line 71. I'm not seeing it. I'm just curious if they have one. Like just add a new line like before and do like a React component that's like a form dot label. It'd be uppercase label. Or yeah, and
It's like,
but that's where you need to put your label. So that one would be name. Like like that'd be your like in between the two tags.
2 tags, okay.
Yeah, so put name there and get rid of the label prop. See if that works.
Property label does not exist.
Okay, just do a, let's see if we can just do a label, like an HTML label. So get rid of the form dot label. Or you still want that there,
Just do like I still want
label,
this there.
a label element.
So a label could be, I think I could do that.
Lowercase label though, because that's like an actual HTML element.
Oh,
Because
okay.
that's what it is like behind the scenes. So label. What is it? What does it not like about that? Okay, wait.
It went away. Okay.
I'll save that. Well, let's give that, that's still going to be like the same. See if you can give that like an inline style, like of like color white, or yeah, do that.
Okay, that works.
There you go.
So that's the workaround, is I just have to like pull it out.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I would have never been able to figure that out on my own. Or would I have? I don't know.
Yeah, as you start working more with semantic and like these frameworks, you'll it's because it's not like you can't really get taught like the specific things. You just learn more how to like massage them into what you want them to do.
Right.
So it's one of the things, I don't know. I think semantic, I don't know. I like it because it's simpler, but it's also like that simpleness can make it harder at times, because it can sometimes be harder to do like more specific things.
Yeah, I was sort of coming across that earlier when I was gonna program like something that would change whenever my screen size changed, would like change the menu to a different format. And I used a grid to make my menu because I thought that would make things easier size wise. But then I was like, oh, I don't think I can change that because with size, because then I would have to maybe somehow customize the width whenever the size change, and that seemed really complicated, if not impossible. So then I thought maybe I have to reformat it out of a grid and just go back to, maybe just use some Flexbox instead. Or I guess maybe there's different menu types within semantic that I could have used and then changed to a different menu format whenever it gets smaller.
Yeah, a lot. I'm wondering.
Do you think am I assessing that right? Did I kind of box myself in with doing a grid?
Are you thinking like your nav bar, or is this just like
My nav bar, yeah.
Yeah, I really think semantic has one that like will automatically turn into like a hamburger menu.
Oh, really? Because that's what I wanted to do as a hamburger. And I searched hamburger and that wasn't a real thing I could search. So I don't know if it has a different name.
Menu, I'm trying to think where that would be. Layout examples. I know I've done that before in semantic. Like I'll just throw this out in Slack. This isn't the code, but here's like a demo from their documentations where they do that. Like this one, so this is a semantic page. And like this one, if you make it small enough, it goes into the hamburger. I
Okay,
know they have that. I'm just like, I can't
Yeah.
find it in their docs. Is it?
So I see like an article that has it, and it looks like what they did was they put a min width and a max width on the various stuff, but I don't know that it makes sense to me. Nav menu. Just, like they're not even, I guess they're just putting it directly as a inline thing.
Yeah, that looks like a little more complicated than what it should be. I don't know if that's, I swear there's an easy way to do it.
Responsive nav bar.
Why does this not have, okay. Okay, so the thing I just slacked out. I guess are you looking at that source code?
They're like a button to get the source code. Oh, there it is.
Yeah, it's right here. So that's their GitHub. They have a GitHub that shows how they do that, but usually they'll have like a starter you can kind of like copy and paste, because sometimes it can be a little more complicated. So you kind of just like copy and paste their starter that gives you that, and then you kind of go from there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that was that what you were, yeah, they have that responsive container. Is that from Semantic? Yeah, maybe it's not straightforward. So
Yeah, I don't know.
there's some code.
I'll try and analyze it and see if I
Yeah.
can figure it out.
Okay. Sweet. Yeah, it's these component libraries, they can give you get a lot of the work done for you, but there's still, it's by no means is it like always complete. So there's definitely lots of work to be done with them still, and it's always just like, I've always just, if try to find something close, like a working example of like something close I'm trying to do, and then get it working. I would recommend when you do your portfolio projects that you don't use Semantic. Like I said, I don't think it, the reason I kind of choose to start out with it is because it's more simpler than the other ones. But I don't think it has the best, it has decent documentation, but and it's kind of limited on the functionality. Like I really like Ant Design and Material and the Bootstrap ones. Those ones I think are a little better. but part of one of the requirements for like the portfolio project, I want to see you try to use some third-party libraries we haven't talked about in class, because that's what your part of your job is going to be, is like working with these third-party libraries, kind of figuring them out on your own. So I think that that's a good candidate, is, you know, use something other than semantic as your component library. Cool. All right, so let's go ahead and get started with, we're gonna need, let's see, we don't have much time left. How do I want to do this? I kind of just want to show you maybe how we could, let's maybe try doing like, I'm kind of going to be skipping some steps in the notes. Let's just go create some random like React page that can like get all of our scores, and then we'll try to create a score. So I can at least have an example of the front end. Sorry, yeah, of our grades component. So let's look at that. So I'm kind of going to wing this and see how much we can get done before lunch. So I'm going to go off the note. I'm going to go off script a little here, because yeah, let's just say this. Let's say I want a page where I'm just going to do this in my component. Let's do this. So if you look at this folder structure, I have components, I have a components folder, and I have a pages folder. So if I'm going to create a page that's going to be its own React Router page, I'm going to throw that file in here. So I'm going to just call this, I don't know, like grades and stuff, grades and more. Because I'm kind of just winging this. I'm not quite sure what this is going to be doing yet, but import React from React. And more. All right, so just throw this in here, export default. Just throw this in a header. Each one. Now, since I have this starter project and it has React Router set up, the first thing I'm going to do, I'm just going to get this component rendering, get the link set up in my navbar. So how I have this working, now in this starter project is going to be using probably, yeah, React Router version 5, because that was just barely updated. So it's going to be a little different, but not so much that we can't figure it out. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to add the route here. So it's this, I still have this path. We'll just call this like grades for now. This is going to be grades and more. So if on my web browser, you go to my website /grades, it's going to render this component. And in my navbar, I can copy one of these items. And so we have a link component from React Router. We want this to go to, we called that grades. That was the path. And here, this menu.item active location.path name. This is just going to match the URL. So if our URL has /grades, then it will make this active, which will essentially just give us some styling. And then I can say whatever I want it to show on my nav bar. So there you go. So that location.path names, it's going to pull off what we have on the URL. It doesn't match grades. If it does, then make that gray. That's how we can get that little highlighting on this. So there we go, grades and more. So now that that's set up, let's grab use state, use effect. Const grades, set grades equals use state. Now let's just grab our skills as well. And our users. So I'm going to create state for grades, skills, and users. Going to have my use effect function. I'm just going to call this like get data function inside of here. And let's make that function const get data. Let user res equal axios.get /API/users. Let skills res and just wait for this. I'll wait for that. Great. So why am I doing this? Just because I can. There's no particular reason, but we can do multiple Axios calls, just one after the other. I could technically create this one component, have this do all my CRUD actions on everything, just have it happen all here. But what I'm going to do here is I'm going to grab all my users. I'm going to grab all my skills and all my grades. Async. You think I would know how to spell async after typing it so many times? So here, I could set users to be users res.data. I could set skills to be user skills.data. Sorry, skills res.data. And set grades to be grades res.data. So for now, let's just do this. Let's do an H3. Let's say users. Let's do a code block. Let's do a stringify JSON. Or sorry, JSON dot stringify users. Let's grab our do this with skills. And let's do this with grades. Axios is not defined. I need to import Axios. Okay, all right, let's not auto import Axios from Axios. There we go. So I could have this page and I have 3 Axios call. I'm grabbing all my users, all my skills, and all my grades. Cool. Let's create just really quickly. Let's do a form. Just going to do this. Let's maybe do this as its separate form. So I'm going to do it in here. Let's do a grade form. I'm going to call this grade form basic. This is going to be really simple how this works. So import React. And I'm going to want use state with this. React const grade form basic. Just do a form from, let's use semantic for this. Import form. I'll show you another way to do a form, because this was a problem Madeline was having with like styling. So I can do a form dot field. If I want, I can just like do an HTML label here. What do we want? Let's do user ID. And then I could also just do like a normal input, I think, here. And I think semantic will, since it's wrapped in this form dot field, it will style it. Let's see if this works. Export default grade form basic. And then yeah, I could have my button. Let's just do a button as well. So I'm going to do something basic just to test it out. Just go ahead and let's actually just do a divider from semantic. And do my grade form basic component. Button is not defined, so I need to go back to my grade form. Import that. So I'm getting this error. Nothing was returned from render. Usually means the return statement is missing. Yes, it is. So I can go ahead and do return this JSX. So I forgot to return that in this component. There we go. There's my label and there's my input. So I could do my user ID. I could do my skill ID. And then I could do my grade or my score. Cool. So now do my submit handler. Then I'm just going to pull this. I'm just going to do all of this in my app, but sorry, in my grades and more, but I'm going to expect this to call like a props.add. Let's do props.add grade. And then we're going to need some state. Okay, so let's do user ID, set user ID. Let's use state. So let's set this to whatever, an empty string. And we'll do skill ID. Camel case this, set skill ID. And we'll also have some state for our score. And for our input, we can just kind of do as we've been doing this as the same. You can do our value. That's going to be our user ID, our on change. It's going to take the event. And we can do this. I think there's actually a shorthand in semantic where the second argument is a object and we can just take the value off of that. Let's see if this works. I could do, e.target.value, but you might see this in there. So let's just show you this. So set, that to be uppercase, user, set user ID value. I could do e.target.value, but I think with semantic, let's just see if this works. This might not work if we're using an HTML input. Let me just try this out. Yep, and that's not working. Can't read value, it's undefined. Let me show you, if I make this a form.input, let me see if this works. That works. So this input, that is just your HTML input that has an on change. Now, if I use that input, I'm going to have to do the e.target.value. But I just want to show you this because you'll see this in the semantic documentation. They have their own input, that looks the same, like it has a value, it has this on change, but really it works a little differently. Like, for instance, they have this second argument or parameter to this function, which you can pull off the value from that. I don't have to do it that way. I could kind of do it the way we've been doing it. E.target. Dot value. That works. And if I make this just a normal input, you know, that would work as well. But let's do it this way, just so we can see this example. But if I use their input, if I use semantics input, I can just destructure the value off of this second argument. But I need the E there because I need that first parameter defined. I can't just do this because then it's going to think I'm destructuring off of the event. Even though I'm not, this is one case where like that E is grayed out. So E is declared, but its value is never read. This is a case where I have to have that there. Does that make sense why I have to have that there, even though I'm not using it? Take that as a yes. All right. So yeah, I could just copy this and do the same thing for my other inputs. Just change up the values. This is going to be skill ID, set skill ID. This can be score. And this can be set score. And let's just console.log an object as skill ID, user ID, and score. Just to kind of check that I have this form ready to go. All right, I do 1, 2, 3. I'll inspect so I can see the console.log. Add skill 2, 1, 3. So that's good. Click and add. I don't know if you noticed this. I'm not doing the e.prevent default. Right? I'm not in my submit form. I don't have that there. This is not like refreshing my page. What's going on with that? Any ideas? I'm not using the HTML form. See how like lowercase form, that's an HTML form. I'm using a form component from semantic. So that form component, this is a prop on submit. If I switch this to form, that's not a prop. That's an HTML attribute. If I switch that to capital form, that on submit is a prop on this form component. That, you know, they just decided to call it on submit because I'm sure behind the scenes they're using a on, like, you know, something very similar to this. They're probably using a, if you look at the form component from semantic, it probably looks something like this. But they can add their own code to that. They can do whatever they want. So I'm on their form, they are probably just automatically doing this for you. So that's why you don't need that, because semantic is adding their own functionality on the form. Kind of like they're doing with this same thing with the input. Sweet. So now what I'm going to do, we're going to call this props.addGrade function. Well, that's not defined anywhere. If I try to run this, I'll get an error. You know, props.addGrade is not a function. So we haven't defined that. So let's do that. But I'm going to do this in my, I mean, I guess I really don't have to do it. Well, we can do it here. I can do this in my app because this really is where my grade state's living. So this would be a good place to add it. Make this async. One other thing I want to do is this props.addGrade. I want to pass that the values from my form. Because after all, that's why I'm calling it here, is because I need to give it the values from my form. So this is going to take a grade that was just passed me from my form. And we can do our Axios call. So let response equal Axios.post. I'll go to API /grades. Let's pass it the grade that was given to us. And then let's do a set grades. Let's take our res.data, throw that at the start, and then spread out over our grades. And then we can throw this function on down. So it's defined in our form via props.
You spelled data wrong. You spelled date instead.
Ooh, thank you. So something that's a little bad with this, with how I have this set up, like I think this should work, but it's not the best UI because I have to like go through, I have to find an actual ID of a user and an actual ID of a skill. So one, like I have a user with ID 1 and a skill with ID 1. So let's do 1 and 1, and let's give it a score of like, I don't know, 1,000. So it's easy to find. Click add. All right, I got a 422 error. So let's look at that in my server. See if this gives me any information. All right, look how my parameters are coming in. I have a skill, uppercase ID, a user ID. I'm also not handling this error. Let's do a try catch. Maybe get a little better idea. Console.log error. That's probably not going to be super useful. It's not actually going to show the error I want to see. I want to do the error.response for this one to see that 422 error. So let's clear this. Let's click add. Where is my error.response? That is hitting that, right? 27, 28. I don't see this being logged. refresh just to make sure. Okay, so let's do 1, 1, and 1,000 or whatever. Add. Where is my error?
Does your skill need a name as well?
No, the problem is it's how my parameters are coming through. It's skill uppercase ID, user uppercase ID. So this is how my server's getting it, which is not valid. Because if I look at my grades controller, I need it wants user underscore ID, because that's what it needs to create a new grade. It needs that to be user underscore ID. So I'm not matching that name. I'm just trying to find, I don't know why I'm trying to get that to shape, because what I'm expecting the error to say is, user ID must exist and skill ID must exist. That's why it's not creating it. This is a little harder to read to see that error. So I'm trying to just show it in my, oh, I don't have an await. I'm missing my await. That's what's going on there. So I don't have my await because that's failing. That should definitely be hitting my catch. I'm not even getting this yo-yo response. So I forgot the await. Let's try that again. Here we go. Yo, 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 there's the 422. There's the error dot response. There's the data. There's the data dot error. There's the error object that I sent back in my controller. Right. I go to my grades controller. Right there, render JSON error. That's the data. There it is. Boom. There it is. So then I can go look at it, see skill must exist, user must exist. And why that's not working is because I'm sending that the wrong way. So I could change that here, skill underscore ID. So that's going to be the key name. The value is going to be my state and user underscore ID. And I can leave score as is. So now if I try to add that, there's the score added to my, there's the grade added to my grades table. So that's how I kind of wanted to show you it this way, because I think this shows you how you create this has many, like how you create a record in your has many table. You need the ID of the user and the skill. You have to have those. And then you can give it the score. Now you're not going to need the skill or user ID if you're updating, because those will already exist. You just need a way to find it, which is probably going to be the ID of the grade. So if you're upgrading, if we go to our grades controller, we'll just kind of look at it here. If we're doing an update, well, we probably want to like throw our update in here. So we set our grade. And we kind of do it like this. I'm just going to copy this, like if grade.update grade params Now, if they don't, so let me ask you this question. If they don't send me user ID or skill ID and I am passing this sanitizer, is that still going to work? The answer is yes. Remember the permit? It's not going to fail if they're not there. It's just going to allow them to pass through. Maybe I don't want someone to update when they update a grade, I don't want them to update the user or the skill. I just want them to update the score. So I might do something like this. Like I'm going to require grade to be there and I'm only going to allow score. So if they try to update, like if they send data that has like a user ID and skill ID, I'm going to filter it out. So that would prevent someone from the front end updating the user or the skill. It would only allow them to update the score. If you wanted it to work that way. So yeah. But can you see this UI is pretty horrible, right? To actually have to pick the user ID and the skill ID. Because I have to like go in and find the ID of the skill and then pick it. And same thing with this user and skills. So a better way to do this would be in your form to maybe use something like a select or some way that only shows them, you know, the available options. So let's just look at that really quick with semantic, or maybe I might just show you how to do this just so you have a working example. Let's see if which one I want to use. And just to kind of show you what I'm talking about. All right, so if we go to, I forget if it's called a select or a drop select. So we want something like this. So if I look at their select example, what they have is they have an array of options that I need to send to their select component. And I send that down as props. So, and then the options has a key, value, and text. So the key is for React, that just needs to be unique. The value is what's going to get sent, or like is kind of the state, that's like what we want to send. And then the text is just going to be whatever the user sees. So I'm just going to do this really quickly in my form, just so you have an example, because it's almost lunchtime. Let's do a form field. Or actually, I'm going to do this in where I have my state. So this grades and more. I'm just going to do a form right here. And we'll finish this tomorrow. Let's do a select. Button. Okay, I'll submit. Okay, const handle submit. All right. So for now, I'm just going to options. I don't know. I don't think we have enough time to do this. Yeah, I think because there's a couple steps we need to do. I think this is gonna take like 20 minutes. I don't want to take that long, because it's 1 o'clock. But I will give you like a hint or like kind of the method. So you're gonna want, if you do get to this point, I think for today, if you do get to creating an appointment, it's fine if you just manually hard code in the ID. But what we're going to want to do probably is, grab this user data in some way. We want to go from an array of objects that looks like that to something that looks like how semantic wants it. Because semantic wants an array of objects that have key value and text. So I want to take this data and, I want to maybe abstract the name. So the name would go in as the text. The value would be the ID. And I guess I could have the key be the ID as well. So I want to go from an array of one type of data to an array of another type of data. Which method do you think you'll use?
Map.
So you're going to take this data, you're going to map over it to create this options data. And then you can put that options data in your select. But we'll do that tomorrow. But if you get this far and you want to try it on your own, try it on your own. But yeah, we'll talk about this tomorrow. I'm just gonna comment that out too. Cool. Any questions on this? I will push this up to GitHub. Like I said, we're gonna finish this lecture tomorrow, and then on Friday, we can have like a little bit of a review day. If you see in the lecture notes, there's like some special components. So we might even create some of our own components on Friday that are in the lecture notes. So if there's no questions, you can go ahead and hop off for lunch, and we'll see back at 2. Have a good lunch, everyone.